We all know the pain of hearing that a game you've been looking forward to for months has been cancelled, so in this one we're going to wrap up 11 games that you're never going to be able to play because they have been abandoned. Do let us know in the comments if you have any other games that you know of that have been abandoned that you are looking forward to, and of course show support for the channel by clicking like and subscribe for all the other videos that we have for you guys. First up is Star Wars 1313, which was a video game in development by LucasArts. It was to follow the bounty hunter Boba Fett navigating through level 1313, which was a subterranean metropolis within the planet Coruscant. The player would have taken on the role of an unidentified bounty hunter who would soon be killed by a mysterious figure subsequently revealed to be Boba Fett. The player would then take control of Boba Fett for the duration of the game, finding themselves navigating Coruscant's underworld metropolis of level 1313. Various exotic weapons would have been utilized as the player uncovers a criminal conspiracy, and after a successful showing at E3, the studio continued production during the next few months. Then in September of that year, President Megan quit and the company was put on a hiring freeze. Then shortly afterwards, Lucas announced the sale of the company to Disney. The staff continued to work on it, including producing demos to show the game to their new shareholders and later Electronic Arts. This lasted until the eventual reorganization of LucasArts. Then, after a period of limbo in the development of the game, the Walt Disney Company, of course, who had acquired the Star Wars franchise, ultimately terminated the production of the game when Disney closed down LucasArts and laid off its staff in 2013. Then on January 2014, a report emerged including that Disney had abandoned the trademark for 1313, and according to sources from GameStop, the game had major production difficulties even before the Disney acquisition. So ultimately, Star Wars 1313 was never meant to be. And next we're going to talk about Scalebound, which is a cancelled action role-playing game which was being developed by Platinum Games from 2013 through to 2017. It was scheduled to be released in 2017 for Xbox One and Microsoft Windows, but Microsoft Studios announced the cancellation of the game's development in January of 2017. In the game, players would assume the control of Drew, who is accompanied by a dragon called Thuban. Players would use a variety of weapons to defeat enemies, and could even issue commands to the dragon itself, which assisted the player during these battles. Unlike other games developed by Platinum Games, there was more of a focus on the graphical fidelity and the role-playing aspect instead of the action of the game. Interestingly enough, both the character Drew and the dragon Thuban are bonded together, so either one of them dying would cause the other to die as well. Thuban, the dragon, is usually controlled by an artificial intelligence, but players can give commands to the dragon when performing attacks. Drew can also enter the Dragon Link mode, which allows the player to directly control the dragon from his perspective. In this mode, the perspective would shift to first person, and Drew is very vulnerable to being attacked. There are 3 types of dragons, each with different characteristics, and the 3 types can be blended together through the game's customization options, and the dragon's abilities, appearances, and armor can be modified by the player. The dragon can be ridden, though not in the beginning of the game, and they can perform a special elemental attack with the Berserker mode. The player can also upgrade their abilities by using gems that enemies drop. Back in May of 2019, Platinum Studios head Atsushi Inaba said that it wasn't easy to see the publisher Microsoft receive criticism for the decision, as he felt both sides failed and that ultimately the game didn't do all of the things that we needed it to do as a developer. In February of 2020, Inaba said that while Scalebound remains an intellectual property fully owned by Microsoft, Platinum Games would want to return to it if given the opportunity. And in a video interview with cutscenes, Kamiya apologized for the game's cancellation and stated the development team were not experienced enough in creating a title with an emphasis on online features. I personally thought Scalebound looked fantastic and was really intriguing to me, so I really do hope we'll see a return of it at some point in the future. And next up is Silent Hills, arguably one of the most infamous on the list in recent years, and it definitely let a few horror game fans down with how iconic the PT demo was. Silent Hills was a cancelled horror game developed by Kojima Productions that was to be published by Konami for the PlayStation 4. It was in development since 2012 and was then cancelled in 2015. It was to be the 9th main installment in the Silent Hill series and was meant to be directed by Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro. In the PT demo, it used a first-person perspective which centered on an unknown protagonist controlled by the player. You awakened in a haunted suburban house and experienced supernatural occurrences. Available areas were in the house to explore, which consisted of an L-shaped corridor with 2 rooms adjacent to it, a bathroom and the staircase which led to a room in which the player starts a loop, or a continuous reincarnation of the corridor. The only actions the player could use was walking and zooming, and to progress the player must investigate frightening events and solve cryptic puzzles. Each time a loop is successfully completed, changes appeared in the corridor. In addition to that, the player also could encounter a hostile ghost named Lisa, and if she catched the protagonist, the player has a random chance of triggering a jump scare when turning the camera horizontally and is sent back to the beginning of the current loop. Sources have reported that due to the conflicts with Konami, Kojima and his senior staff plan to leave Konami following the completion of Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Konami also announced a reconstruction of its video game business and removed references to Kojima and Kojima Productions from the official promotional materials for its games. And as such, Silent Hills was no more. Next up is Gotham by Gaslight, which was meant to be heavily based on the comic of the same name, which features Bruce Wayne going up against Jack the Ripper, who has come to Gotham to find new victims. Batman is at one point believed to be Jack the Ripper by the people of Gotham, and Inspector Gordon also tells Bats the story of a case he worked on where a man killed his wife and then tried to kill himself by drinking a strange poison which has left him with a permanent smile. It seems a shame that such a promising and unique game was never given the go-ahead, but from the ashes has risen the brilliant Arkham series, and watching the gameplay video you can clearly see the way that Batman moves is very similar to how he behaves in the Arkham games. The game also seems like players would need to rely on many of the gadgets that Batman has at his disposal in order to overcome obstacles and outmaneuver the enemies. The publisher THQ was ultimately unable to get the licensing rights from Warner Brothers, which would be needed to create a Batman game. It remains unclear why exactly the rights couldn't be obtained, though it's been suggested that either THQ could not afford the rights or Warner Brothers failed to see the merit in a steampunk Batman title. And next up is Mega Man 3. In an interview back in May of 2007 with OneUp.com, Keiji Inafune expressed that the original team members who worked on the previous Mega Man Legends games were interested in developing Mega Man Legends 3, and had considered using the MT Framework engine. A few months later, Inafune commented that he had been asked by several fans if Mega Man Legends 3 would be made, and although he expressed a desire to make such games, he stated that he could not do it at that time. While Capcom was developing the game, several aspects of the game, such as a new heroine Aero, a mech, and Mega Man's designs were chosen by fans as Capcom invited fans to send their designs in their official Mega Man 3 Legends website. Although Inafune ultimately left Capcom in October of 2010, the team working for Mega Man Legends 3 stated that the game would continue development. Capcom did intend to release Mega Man Legends 3 prototype version in 2011 for the 3DS eShop, which featured 10 missions and Barrett as a playable character. Legends 3 was ultimately cancelled on July 18th of 2011, but what's funny about the whole situation is that Keiji Inafune, who left Capcom, created his own studio and went on to create Mighty No. 9, which ultimately, while it looked like Mega Man, wasn't what people wanted and didn't play very well. They then went on to kickstart Red Ash: The Indelible Legend in 2015, which was supposed to be a spiritual successor to the Mega Man Legends series, but 7 years later there's been no new updates on this, and now the studio is owned by Level 5 and is making mobile games, so it seems highly unlikely that this project will ever see the light of day. Next up is Fez 2, which was a puzzle platformer and featured a really interesting mechanic which played with both a 2D and 3D perspective. Even though fans have been really excited for Fez 2, the game has never come to light and was ultimately cancelled indefinitely, but honestly the reasons might surprise you. No one expected Fez 1 to be as popular as it is, and Fish suddenly found himself at the centre of a larger conversation about the state of indie video games, even appearing in a documentary on the subject. Of course, this increased his fame and invited criticism from all angles, and this is where Marcus Beer comes into the scene. Beer, who goes by the handle Annoyed Gamer, is a game critic and web personality who criticised Fish and Jonathan Blow, the creators of Braid, for being effing hipsters, who wanted to believe that their opinions were more important than other indie creators. And in a 2013 episode of Invisible Walls, a video podcast from the GameTrailers.com website, Beer cited Fish and Blow as the top indie developers who were always available for a statement, calling them the self-styled kings of the indie genre. However, Beer didn't believe that title was deserved and went on a rant about the pair of them. Later that day, this then caused Fish to lock his Twitter account, but not before announcing that Fez 2 was cancelled and he was leaving the gaming industry. Fish even said that he wished video games were a building so that he could burn it down. Later, Fish's company Polytron confirmed that Fez 2 was indeed cancelled, and ultimately he disappeared. Essentially, he didn't want to put up with the abuse that he was getting and so chose to leave the whole video game development space. It's all very sad, just like our next game Sadness, which was a survival horror video game in development for the Wii console and was one of their earliest titles announced for the system. While the game initially drew positive attention for its unique gameplay concepts such as black and white graphics and emphasis on psychological horror over violence, Sadness became notorious when no evidence of a playable build was ever publicly released. It was revealed that Sadness had entered development hell due to problems with deadlines and relationships with external developers, which led to its eventual cancellation in 2010, along with the permanent closure of the company making it. It was originally promoted as a unique and realistic survival horror game which would surprise players and focus on the psychological horror aspects over the violence, containing associations with narcolepsy, noctophobia, and paranoid schizophrenia. But like many other games in development hell, it ultimately, of course, failed to be released. Next up is Insane, another survival horror video game formerly in development by Volition and was meant to be published by THQ. It was a collaboration with film director Guillermo del Toro, and it was to be developed for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360 back in 2013. It was also intended to be the first installment of a planned trilogy of Insane video games. It was originally announced back in 2010 at the Spike Video Game Awards on the 11th of December 2010 in the form of a 30-second teaser trailer. Del Toro said that with this new series of video games, I want to take players to a place they've never seen before, where every single action makes them question their own senses of morality and reality. THQ and Volition were equally excited to make this vision of a completely new game universe into a reality. THQ ultimately announced the cancellation of Insane on the 6th of August in 2012, with the intellectual property rights being transferred to Del Toro. And next up we need to talk about Fable Legends, which began development in summer of 2012 and was announced on the 20th of August in 2013, with a cinematic trailer directed by Ben Hibbon and narrated by Michael Gambon as the villain. The first gameplay for the game was revealed in June of 2014, and a limited closed multiplayer beta began on the 16th of October in 2014. It was made on a budget of around $75 million, and it was going to be one of the most expensive video games of all time. The game was intended to have a 5 to 10 year life cycle and to be integrated into the cloud features of the Xbox One. Smart Glass also had features that would allow villain players to make their plan of attack before a quest. Microsoft also intended to release Fable Legends on Windows 10 and exclusive to the Windows 10 store. The game would feature cross-platform multiplayer between Microsoft Windows and Xbox One, and also support for DirectX 12 was to be added with the game's release. Lionhead had confirmed that the game would use a free-to-play model, and initially for 2015 the game was officially delayed to the following year so as to give additional time for Lionhead Studios to polish the game. An open beta was then set to be available in the first or second quarter of 2016. Microsoft then cancelled the game in March of 2016 and closed Lionhead Studios. The game's beta ended on the 13th of April, with players who had purchased in-game gold receiving full refunds from all in-game purchases. Fable Legends was meant to be based around 4 heroes and a villain. With each role, a player would be fulfilled via online multiplayer or by an AI. The same game experience was possible regardless of multiplayer or single player with up to 4 AI players. All of the game's story and quests could have been played single player using AI heroes as sidekicks or enemies. It was also possible to play through the game's content as either a hero or as a villain. Each hero within Fable Legends was meant to be a unique character with unique abilities, powers, and gameplay. There were several heroes that were identified, one of which was Sterling, a Prince Charming type character who wields a rapier and makes wisecracks. There was also Winter, who is focused on will-based abilities and ice attacks, Rook, who focused on ranged combat with a crossbow, and Inga, a paladin-like character wearing heavy armor and wielding a sword and shield. Meanwhile, the villain player controls the nature of the quest the heroes embark on, such as where enemies spawn, how aggressive they are, when the boss will come out of its lair, when to bring down an impassable portcullis or lay a trap to separate heroes from each other. The villain has a certain amount of creature points, which they can use during the setup phase to plan and their strategy, and each creature of course costs a certain amount of points to summon. During the setup phase, the villain can also place a certain number of interactable objects in the quest, such as traps and gates and so on. Once the battle has begun, the villain player then focuses on ordering their creatures around in real time in a similar manner to RTS games. He can order creatures to attack a specific hero to activate certain abilities and to reposition for ambushes. During combat, he can also activate gates to damage and split up heroes, as well as use traps to distract and wound them. Overall, it was a very ambitious multiplayer game that unfortunately never made it into fruition. And next up, we need to talk about Deepdown, where in the PlayStation meeting of 2013, Sony debuted the PlayStation 4, and Capcom's Yoshinori, best known for his work on the Street Fighter series, revealed Deepdown alongside their new game engine. The reveal trailer for the game showed an armored warrior battling a medieval fire-breathing dragon, and during the Tokyo Game Show of 2013, Capcom's producer Yoshinori announced that Deepdown was to be a free-to-play title and was initially expected to release in 2014 after a public beta had coincided with the Japanese release of the PS4. In early 2015, in an interview with 4Gamer, it was revealed that the vision for the game had expanded since its initial 2013 reveal, and so the development timescale had been expanded. Then in June of 2018, Capcom extended the trademark for the game, and during an interview with Eurogamer in 2019, which was primarily focused on Street Fighter V, there was a response to a mention of Deepdown, saying that despite its long absence, the game has not been completely given up on. However, the status of the game is still currently unknown, and in September of 2021, the former chairman of SIE Worldwide Studios, Sean Layden, stated that he had no idea what happened to Deepdown, but says that other team members of Yoshinori might pick up the game further to develop. And next up is Project Titan, which was the name for a cancelled Blizzard Entertainment massively multiplayer online game. With speculation regarding the game beginning in 2017, Blizzard revealed little information besides that it would be completely new and not be based on the company's then current three main franchises. The game was then internally cancelled by Blizzard in May of 2013, though publicly they announced that the project would be delayed as they took the title in a different direction. It was then officially cancelled in September of 2014, but internally about 40 members of the Titan project used the development assets to create a new game which would later become known as Overwatch. Titan was cancelled because the company failed to control the scope of the game. He described Titan as essentially being two games developed in parallel, which ultimately created pipeline problems. Part of the team was working to make the game engine support the ambitions for the title, but this left the content developers idle with no tools to create the gameplay. He and other Blizzard executives decided that it would be better to cancel the title rather than wrangle it down. The remaining Titan project group of 40, which included Kaplan and Chris Metzen, were told they needed to come up with a new idea in about 6 weeks or they would be transferred to other departments. Taking inspiration from team-based shooters like Team Fortress 2 and the popularity of online battle arena games like MOBAs, the team used the existing Titan assets to create a prototype game where players would select predefined heroes with different types of abilities and skills and face off in team-based matches. Metzen also said that due to the recent failure of Titan, the group suffered from poor morale, but the idea of a team-based shooter invigorated them and helped them establish an optimistic narrative that would take place in the near future of Earth, encompassing a range of diverse heroes and characters. The prototype was then approved successfully and the team set off to develop what would later become Blizzard's fourth major IP, Overwatch. If you know of any other games that have been cancelled that you are looking forward to, put them down in the comments below and support the channel by clicking like and subscribing for all the other content already on the channel. And the videos on screen now we think you guys will really enjoy, so make sure to click them and don't miss out because we've made lots of content just for you.